welcome to this special. As we mark the end of a financial year and the beginning of the next, we bring you a special discussion which launches our ambitious series Inside India's Best Known Companies, where we will be talking to business leaders and key policy makers whose companies and departments will play a critical role in powering the next leg of India's growth. To lay the groundwork on the series on Remoulding India and share their vision on how we can cash in on the opportunities that India has as it scripts a recovery, joining us today are Amitabh Kant, Secretary DIPP and the man behind the government's ambitious Make in India campaign; R.C. Bhargava, the chairman of Maruti Suzuki; Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, chairperson and founder of Biocon; Vikram Kirloskar, President of SIAM and Vice Chairman of Toyota Kirloskar Motors; Avinash Vashistha, CMD of Accenture in India; B. Sriram, MD of SBI, India's largest bank, which is one of the key drivers of the financial inclusion mandate; and Sanjay Kapoor, Chairman of Micromax Informatics. Thank you so much for joining us. Amitabh, let me start off with you with the first question, really. In many senses, we are in a sweet spot as far as the economy is concerned. The government has laid out its policy roadmap going ahead. There are concerns on the agricultural side, but on the whole, from where you're sitting, are we looking at a recovery which is discernible? Have investments started picking up? What sense are you getting?
Mini, we are growing at about 6%. The rate is accelerating. We are probably amongst the only countries which is growing and expanding in the midst of a very barren economic landscape around the world. I think we need to accelerate at a far more rapid pace. We've taken several measures on this front. The FDI regime in railways, defense, construction, medical devices, insurance has opened up, and if you were to look at the latest FDI figures, India has grown very substantially. The inward remittances in terms of FDI has grown at about almost close to 40%. And to my mind, next year will be the big winner for India. I personally feel that we should really aim at, over the next 2 to 3 years, at rates of 9 to 10% per annum, year after year, and sustain it over a long-term period. The challenge is to get into that league and sustain it for long periods of 3 decades or more, to be able to create employment for a very young population.
That sounds very good, Amitabh. But let me get Mr. Bhargava in. Mr. Bhargava, in the immediate run-up, what do you think the government should be focusing on now that it has laid out its vision statement?
Well, you know, the biggest weakness we have always had in India is the ability to translate policy pronouncements and intentions of people at the top to the ground level. There's a big gap between what is proposed, what is contained in the documents and things, and what actually happens. Equally, when some new piece of legislation or project is proposed, initially it looks very good, but when it finally comes out, the fine print on it has such conditions imposed that they become, in many cases, impractical to implement. I think they need to take up this challenge of implementing things correctly, quickly, actually on the ground.
Right. Kiran, when you joined us post the budget, you also said pretty much the same thing, that the devil will be in the detail and the execution capability. The government has given a great vision statement. Now it's about getting it done.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's very clear. I mean, I think the euphoria is there. But I think really we must recognize the fact that we do have a window of this opportunity. And if we don't utilize this window optimally, we might never be able to get back this huge euphoria and interest there is in India, because we must execute. I think, you know, Mr. Bhargava has said it. I'm sure Mr. Amitabh Kant is also fully appraised of this. I think Mr. Bhargava said it very well. We have always failed on translating these big ideas. I'm the biggest proponent of the Make in India agenda. I think it's a very important and very timely focus for this country. But how fast are we going to be able to execute and deliver on this agenda? And to me, I don't see the ground reality, you know, aligned with what is being said. I mean, I still feel that all the great ideas of self-attestation, deemed approvals, automatic approvals that can actually compress the regulatory timelines in terms of project implementation are simply not happening. I can tell you that I can right now say that when I look at some of the projects that we are involved with, there is no difference in the ease of doing business. I mean, it's as difficult, as cumbersome. And you know, there are many opportunities for us to compress many of these regulations and rules by, you know, doing what the government has been talking about. But why is it not happening? And I think Mr. Bhargava has hit the nail on the head. It is basically that the lower ranks of the bureaucracy are simply not aligned with the top.
But Amitabh, really, it is about translation, it is about expediting it, because, you know, there is impatience on the ground, and that's a legacy impatience problem. How do you plan to deal with it?
No, there are severe challenges, and I totally agree that the challenge is one of implementation. But we must understand that we are talking about a country which has for 60 years has had a very controlled and a cabined mindset. Over the years, we've built up rules, regulation, procedures, acts, everything which has tended to circumscribe private business activity. Now, a new government comes in and says that you scrap rules, procedures, regulations, and just the other day, I mean, we've actually, the amount of scrapping of rules, regulations, procedures the central government has done in the last 6 to 7 months is more than what would have ever been done in the last 50, 60 years. But much of the action is in the states, and I think it's very important. We have on our part listed down 98 different action points. We've communicated to all the state governments. We've held a detailed amount of interaction with the state governments. We have given them timelines till May. In June, July, we will evaluate the states. Our objective is to name the best 3 performing states and the worst 3 performing states. The objective is really to build a sense of competition amongst the states. Much of the action is in the states, and I'm quite sure that as we do this, many states will replicate what the central government is doing, and many states will get into this competitive spirit of making India a far more easier place to do business.
We will, of course, revisit this theme, but let me shift focus to the more granular details, you know, bottom up. Vikram, if I can bring you in here, from your vantage point at SIAM, tell me, what is the road to recovery looking like in one of the most high-profile industries that India has, which is auto manufacturing?
I'm feeling a little more optimistic on the auto industry and generally the economy as a whole. The heavy commercial vehicle sector, which was terribly depressed the last 2 years. We've seen a good increase, albeit from a low base. We've seen a good increase in the heavy commercial vehicles in the last 6 months, and it looks like it's going ahead in the same manner. And what that really means is that there is some demand for capital equipment and transport, which means some kind of execution of projects is taking place. I fully appreciate what Mr. Bhargava and Kiran are saying. Yes, there are a lot of issues on the ground level that we have to sort out, but there is still some activity definitely which is increasing at the infrastructure level. We are also seeing the car industry, the four-wheelers, that has improved. It's not 10-15%, it's 4% right now. And two-wheelers, which was doing very well last year, stagnated for the last few months, but I think that will also improve. Two-wheelers are related to the rural market as well. So I'm very confident that we'll start moving ahead.
But let me come to you, Avinash, at this stage. You know, we are in a sweet spot if you were to compare India with pretty much every other economy in the world. How best can we capitalize on it and make India globally competitive?
I think India's got a great, future ahead in terms of the growth rate really picking up. I think one of the things that we should definitely do is provide some impetus to some of the core sectors like services, agriculture, and manufacturing. And this is where the reforms need to be really pushed. Also, with the Digital India, and what digital is doing, not just to India, but to businesses globally, I think it provides a great opportunity for India to leapfrog in terms of being a digital nation in that sense. I think one of the things also is we have a workforce that is very young, and by 2030, we will add close to 250 million people to the workforce. I think skilling this workforce to where the digital India is going, where I think India growth opportunities lie in terms of Make in India. I think it's a great opportunity out there.
On that note, we head into a short break, but we'll be back with lots more. Stay with us. Sriram, let me get you in here and Sanjay in here. You know, the Jan Dhan Yojana is supposed to be the other big pillar, and it is being considered as the other big pillar of transformation and remoulding of India. My question to you is, as a bank, India's largest bank, which is spearheading a lot of this, how do you see the pass-through impact of something as big as this on the larger economy?
It's a big impact. Actually, if I can start off with some statistics, we had close to almost in State Bank of India about 3 crores of accounts being opened across 6 or 7 months. And to that extent, we have, there were 3 major objectives to my mind in this Jan Dhan Yojana. One is, of course, to get the people financially included, to tell them that opening an account is no big deal. The second is, of course, that whether it's for the top corporate or for the last man standing, the ease, the convenience and the affordability of any transaction is required to be taken out. And the third, and more importantly, is that this is an instrument of saving. This is an instrument that we can give in social security, and this is also an instrument whereby through transactions we can make a person live his life and create a livelihood for the person. So all in all, what I feel is that by the thrust that the government has given through this, on one side, the banks have been, refocused into this area of, social inclusion and financial inclusion. On the other hand, also, there is a great amount of administrative costs that the government can save by way of transfers into these accounts.
Sanjay, this also, gives a new meaning to inclusive growth, so to say. But my question to you is that given that a lot of this is going to be driven by mobility or mobile phones, how are you seeing it pan out? And of course everybody's spoken about the great benefits of manufacturing of mobile handsets moving to India. What's your own sense? How far away are we from really seeing mass production of mobile handsets in India?
So I think let me come down to the moot point and say that if I had 2 asks, I would have them around infrastructure development for the long run. And this time the definition of infrastructure would change from just being physical infrastructure to physical and digital infrastructure, which is what some of my colleagues just spoke about. And the other is growth. But if the economy continues to grow by 8%, 8.5% for the next 4-5 years, I'm sure the discretionary income is going to go up, the middle class is going to swell, and therefore consumption in the market is going to go up. Let me draw your attention now towards the entire infrastructure part of it and say, when you come down to physical infrastructure, still the monies that are being committed there seem to be fairly small, and also our track record on implementing and rolling out the physical infrastructure has been a big question mark over the last so many years and decades. I think when it comes to digital infrastructure, it's a whole new animal that is being defined. That includes backhaul, it includes access, it includes storage. And it's very clear that India, unlike many other economies of the world, is a mobile first economy, where the only computing device that an Indian would carry on him to get financially included or to conduct any other important services in life will happen through mobile phones. And therefore, mobile phone in every hand is a great empowerment that will happen, but this cannot happen without a proper access infrastructure. And I think that's where we are lacking. We have a great intention, we have a great vision, but I'm afraid that there's a big gap on the rollout bit. And the way we are going right now seems it's going to take much, much longer than what we think. Here, I think the best savior would be a public-private partnership. And I would strongly urge to the government to say, leave the rollout and implementation to the private sector. You concentrate on single window clearances, get right-of-way clearances, get a lot of spectrum on the table, allow people to have backhauls which will be meaningful to be globally competitive in future, and leave out the rollouts to the private sector, Therefore, that can be a win-win and the only way to achieve our objective of digital India. Coming down to manufacturing and mobile phones, I think we all know that more than 95-96% of the world's produce comes from actually two countries, Taiwan and China, and mainly China. Therefore, if you truly want to manufacture mobile phones and smart devices in India, it's very clear that we know who our competitors are, and therefore we need to benchmark ourselves with these competitors line by line on cost, line by line on policy, and this includes the intellectual property, which is the IPRs. Unless and until we are competitive with these countries, you will not have enough traction for people to start moving their manufacturing units here and manufacturing the products and quality outputs out of India. The opportunity is great because world is at large risk by putting all their eggs in one basket. And India happens to be a very potent market because it's got tremendous amount of domestic demand here. Therefore, we are probably the best option that the world has to bring manufacturing into this country. After we are competitive, now the biggest thing that we have to do is we must understand where the value addition in manufacturing happens. Just a Make in India slogan or assembly is not going to take where India wants to go, and it's not going to create the employment that we are talking about. It can only happen when we start concentrating on high value added activity. High value activity in an industry like mine is design, both hardware and software. It is about analytics and consumer insights. That's where the value addition happens, and getting the whole ecosystem down to India and not just the assembly line. Assembly is probably the least value added activity that manufacturing will have. And finally, look at the policy comprehensively. We have to look at our labor laws, we have to look at other policies so that we can actually compete and ramp up very quickly. China did not ramp up in 1 year, it took 10 years. We may not take 10 years, but we'll need 4 or 5 years to do it. I think if we get these ingredients right, there is a lot of will and enthusiasm amongst operators like us to give it our best shot.
Amitabh, few people understand the importance of infrastructure or the significance of infrastructure in a developing economy like ours than you, because you've been the man behind the DMIC as well. What are the 3-4 things that you are personally focusing on or getting the government to focus on to bridge this gap?
The important thing on infrastructure is that the government should actually structure a number of projects. It should structure about 100 odd projects, get the land, get all the approvals in place, de-risk them completely, and then put them out into the marketplace. To my mind, there is a huge imbalance in demand and supply, but the private-public partnership has broken down, and therefore you need to innovate and bring in several models. You need to bring in availability-based payment, you need to bring in annuity, you need to bring in hybrid models where government puts in some money, the balance is through private-public partnership. Essentially, it's important to understand that there is manufacturing capacity in India. It can easily be ramped up, but infrastructure sector takes a long time. It takes about 5 to 6 years for you to structure projects, and therefore we need to create a complete shelf of projects. We need to bring down our interest rates. We need to ensure that adequate money, long-term lending flows into these projects, and that is a game changer as far as infrastructure is concerned. But on manufacturing side, there are several things. I mean, we've addressed issues of we are addressing issues on ease of doing business. It's a challenging task, and to expect that in 6-7 months we'll address all the issues, it's a continuous process. We'll have to keep hammering at it on a daily basis. We'll have to change the mindset of every single senior officer, junior officer at every single level. We'll have to, but to my mind, it's important to understand that in India, 84% of the jobs are created by the MSME sector. Out of that, 67% are micro enterprises, and therefore we need to bring in flexibility in our labor laws, and that to my mind is extremely critical, because India has to get the size and scale right. If you're not able to, Make in India is not about protectionism. It's about being in a globalized economy. It's about being a part of the global supply chain. And if you want to be a part of the global supply chain, as many Indian manufacturers are doing, you have to think in terms of global size and scale. Think big, think large, and you have to bring in flexibility in your labor laws.
We head into a short break now, but on the other side, we have all our panelists asking Amitabh questions. Vikram, I'm going to get you in here. I think the automobile industry has also shown what it can do to the ancillary business and how that can be scaled up. But my question to you is, and I hope you will also share your insight and ask Amitabh a question, because my question to you is that somewhere, you know, while we are talking about the need to scale, SME is always seen as a more SOP-driven sector than a scale-driven sector. Is that a fair thing to say? And is automobiles perhaps the exception there, where there is need for scale, and we have seen visible signs of that?
We have to relook at the laws regarding SMEs and make sure that the SMEs grow. I wanted to ask Amitabh regarding, I know in the car industry, electronics is a major part. There's probably more electronics in every car than in a mobile phone. And we are talking of the pricing of the car, of the electronics in the car, much less than what is in a mobile phone. India is already importing more than 100 billion on electronics, maybe going up to 400 billion, which is more than probably oil imports. Why can't you, Amitabh, go to some of these companies around the world to see which are the high value added products and do what the Japanese or Chinese, Japanese with MITI did, and made sure people got into the country? Let's do whatever is required to get the electronic sector to start manufacturing, designing, as Sanjay said, and whichever else is the higher value stuff going on in India. I always believe small steps which work, which are permanently established, is much better than taking the big step which is very difficult to attain. Why can't we look at specific industries, focus on those industries, give them all the benefits, all the incentives, regulations that are required, and get them moving?
Amitabh?
So we've looked at a range of sectors, and if you were to say, for instance, look at the defense and aero sector, we've taken a series of measures. We've taken out about 60% of the items away from from any kind of licensing. Anybody from any part of the world can come in and start manufacturing straight away. We've cleared the entire backlog of licenses. Not a single license is left today. We've taken the licenses validity to a period of almost 7 years. We've enhanced the FDI limits. We've done everything possible. On the electronics side, we've prepared a complete package looking at, and I think this point was made earlier by Sanjay, we've looked at what China has done, we've looked at what Taiwan has done. We've the telecom, the IT and the DIPP sat together and has worked out a complete policy on what India needs to do to become a global player. We would have become a global player. We've had a little bit of a setback on account of Nokia, but I think we need to set some of these our own house in order in some of these issues. But I think we've done that homework, and we are taking that forward with the government, all the departments together, and I'm quite sure that in the coming months we'll unveil something very unique for making India a hub for electronic manufacturing.
You know, Kiran, let me get you in here. You've often spoken about the intrinsic strength in India of R&D, of technology, and you have proven that in biotechnology at Biocon. I know there is a big plan around biotechnology and getting, manufacturing going over there. What is your insight from the success that you've had, and what would your question or thought be for Amitabh?
I think, Amitabh actually has touched upon some very, very important issues. I can tell you that today, as we want to expand capacity, there is a huge amount of unutilized capacity in the pharma sector. But what we have found is that to really unlock this unutilized capacity, there are huge regulatory deterrents. So for example, if I want to expand my capacity for, say, vialing capacity, it takes me almost 9 months to get the regulatory clearances to expand my capacity, whereas when I do the same in overseas, it can take me just 1 month. These are the kinds of issues that we have to address, because it is very complex, and what Amitabh said is absolutely correct, that there is a state level set of regulations and a central regulation, and that is what really creates the inordinate delays, because there is no need to have both the state and the center regulating on certain issues, manufacturing being one of them. I think the state regulator has the job of regulating manufacturing in any enterprise that's manufacturing within the state. Now, I think there are enough checks and balances to ensure that any company that does not comply with manufacturing regulations, can actually pay a hefty price. You can have a product recall, you can close down that particular facility, and so on and so forth. But just because you have both the state and the center regulating a simple thing like capacity expansion, it is actually losing us a lot of capacity opportunities and manufacturing opportunities. So there are simple things like this that can actually unlock capacity and manufacturing. And I personally believe that if we actually focus on a few important manufacturing sectors where India has credibility and global leadership, we can actually create a huge opportunity in manufacturing, especially in our sector. And of course, this sector also depends very largely on innovation and R&D support, which we have. I think we have everything that it takes to make us very, very strong, both in scale and size and capability. But I think we need to address some of these pain points, because I can tell you that I operate in, in other parts of the world, and these pain points are far less than what we see in our own country, and these can be easily dealt with. That's why my one question to Amitabh is that, you have been talking about self-attestation, deemed approvals, automatic approvals. Can we look at these in a sector-specific way and really implement these approval timelines, because that will make a huge difference to the manufacturing sector.
So we've, Kiran, actually we've done away with formal permissions, and we've agreed to self-attestation in a vast number of acts. The Boilers Act, for instance, we've just said go ahead with self-attestation. You don't need boiler inspector to come and inspect your boiler. Similarly, I think, in a number of areas, EPFO, ESIC, we've just said put everything online and approval will be given. But to my mind, I think the important thing now is that we allow people, as long as, to just start production, and as long as they do a self-attestation and get it vetted by a statutory auditor. And I think this bit of last work, because it's not just one act, it cuts across sectors, and there are 44 different acts. So we need to study each one of the acts, look at specific provision, which we are in the process of doing. So I think that bit about saying that you don't need, you start production and subsequently, and if we'll give you the approvals, but later if you violate it, we'll put a penal provision on that. And I think that last bit of work is work in progress, and I think you should have that in the next 60 days.
On that note, we head into a short break, but we'll be back with lots more. Stay with us. Two different perspectives in this whole Make in India campaign and the big role it has to play in remoulding India. One from Mr. Sriram from State Bank of India. State Bank of India is also one of the biggest lenders to the SME sector. From a financier's point of view, what are the problems that you see when you deal with your clients, Mr. Sriram, and what would you like Mr. Kant to focus on?
Well, one of the things that Mr. Kant had said earlier, and I fully agree with it, is to de-risk. He talked about de-risking infrastructure, but I think continuously we have to look at de-risking all sectors. The very fact that retail is supposed to be a risk-free or less risk-affected sector as compared to the other industries is that somewhere we are able to capture the full cash flows of the individual, but the same doesn't go with the SME sector. The other point is that in addition to the competitiveness today, there is the margins of these SME players are shrinking every day, and that is something that is a worrying part. And to a large extent, of course, the interest rates are a big burden to them. And because the margins are shrinking, they feel that the interest rates are quite high, and even things like hedging costs seem to be coming in their way of doing safe business. So the important thing is that if you have a business which is relatively safe, relatively risk-free, on a scale of 0 to 10, if you are around, say, up to say 5, you find that these industries will tend to be better placed. They will tend to get better interest rates. They will tend to be more conservative players, and all the same you will find that they will be able to move their business better. All said, all this could also if you are talking about theory, but in practice these are the SMEs are the ones who have very shallow pockets. They don't have deep pockets in terms of equity funding coming in. Most of the time it is their receivables which is stuck. The bigger corporates tend to hold over their receivables, and you find that their working capital cycle tends to become much longer. So irrespective of what is happening in times of stress, most of the SME accounts tend to become much more troublesome. So we need to look at a very holistic picture in this as to how we get the SME of Make in India program in very in a very viable and in a very competitive way, and make sure that each and every industry that comes, obviously they are the ones who give employment to a large number of our population. So if these are the ones who come, and if the confidence of the bankers also tends to go up, it will make this SME business much better than what it is today.
Right. Amitabh, would you agree with that? I mean, at the end of the day, it is the viability and the scalability comes from that?
No, I think some very important points have been made, and more important than anything else is that India needs to have growth with job creation. And if you want to create jobs, then the way out is a very huge focus on our medium and small enterprises. I think we also need to provide them with very easy rules of entry and exit, because the rules of insolvency are very unclear in India right now. The bankruptcy laws are very unclear, so you just can't exit. I mean, if you want to exit, it will take you an inordinately long period, and therefore we need to put that house in order.
Avinash, let me get you in here. When you talk about manufacturing, you put a very traditional lens on it. But God knows, in the last year, 2 years, we've seen a sea change in the kind of companies that have become heroes. It's really the technologically savvy, R&D based or digital mobility based companies that are driving growth. So in many senses, when you're looking at the next phase of manufacturing, the next phase of growth, what are the broad trends that you are seeing?
Well, definitely, I think one of the things is all businesses are digital businesses. And that is a trend that is really making a significant impact. The digital technology is also blurring the boundaries of industrial and economic growth. If you look at in the Accenture study, we have a view of 6 contestable markets which are digital. For example, staying healthy, producing, shopping, paying, traveling. So these are the markets. The definition is very outcome based today, and I think what the companies need to do is to use digital. So businesses, I think 3 things people should look at right now is recognize first of all that all businesses are digital businesses, and also people talk a lot about the digital technology in terms of the SMAC, social media, mobility, analytics, and cloud. Now, the time is where you integrate all of this together to come. For example, when you talk about State Bank of India, the One Touch, which is really a digital bank, and Accenture has worked on that stuff. It is a completely digital bank. I think we need to take the population, the India, through the change management, the transformation to be able to be digital citizen, if you may. And also, I think if you look at it, digital is a significant collaborator. So we need to collaborate across industry, across geography, through the digital technology.
In many senses, Make in India and Digital India are combining their forces, and that could be the big game changer. Amitabh, the other area of Make in India which has led to a little bit of debate, is it Make for India, Make by India? how do you see it happening? Because when we're looking at remoulding India and the road ahead, often comparisons are made with other Southeast Asian countries where manufacturing grew because of the large market outside. Now, if you were to look at the same kind of growth, can we do it from within? And how are you seeing this differentiation?
There's a fairly barren landscape outside India right now. I mean, other than America, other countries are not growing. Europe and Japan are pretty stagnant right now. But when you manufacture, to my mind, it's important that we look not only at the domestic market, but also look at exports. After all, what is the size of, what is the share of India in the global export? It's just about 1.5%. And, many of these companies which came into manufacturing into India, I mean, if you were to just look at the automobiles sector, Hyundai came into India looking at the domestic market, but today it exports 48% of its production to 123 countries of the world. It's made India the manufacturing base to the rest of the world. So does Toyota, so does Honda, so does Suzuki. I mean, they produce for the domestic market, but they also export. So to my mind, the domestic market must be a springboard for export. And India must think on that size and scale. But I wanted to make one or two more points in reference to what Avinash had said. One is that India's strategy of growth will be very, very different from what the rest of the world has seen. And that's simply because we have 950 million mobile users. We have a very young population, 72% below the age of 32. We are growing mobile telephony at about 9 million a month, and therefore in many ways, India will move away from the brick and mortar approach. We will use a digital approach to growth, and that will be driven by a very, very young population. It will be very different. Second point I want to make is that if you were to look at the R&D being established by multinational corporations from across the world, in the last 5 to 6 years, we've had about 850 odd multinational corporations establishing their R&D in Bangalore and Hyderabad. They are employing close to about 450,000 Indians. And this is an invisible part of the India story. So much of the R&D has shifted out from the multinational headquarters of America and Europe and relocated itself in Bangalore and Hyderabad. And I think India has made itself the base for R&D in many ways. And I think these digital technology, R&D will drive India. And to my mind, Make in India, Digital India, Skill India will all converge, must converge and integrate with each other to drive India's growth in the coming years.
On that note, we head into a short break. On the other side, what will it take to really remold India and script a new wave of growth? We get our panelists to share their insights. I'm going to wrap up this discussion by getting each of my panelists to crystal ball gaze and tell me, when we're talking about remolding India, and if all of the issues that we've spoken about get settled, what is the one thing that they would bet on as the new phase of growth? Kiran, let me start off with you.
Well, I am very, very gung-ho about startups. I think this whole explosion that we're seeing in startups and young companies is really going to transform India. At least we are seeing that happening in Bangalore. And I can see that, playing a very important role in India's future.
Right. Vikram?
Well, one of the things that I'm really concerned about is that the prosperous people with wherewithal, should show leadership. Something that disappoints me a lot is when I see someone throw rubbish out of a car. We talk of Swachh India, we are building toilets for the poor, etc., all over the country, doing all kinds of things. But when you see a person who can afford a car throw a piece of paper out of the car, that shows no leadership in this. So I think it's important for us to get going, even in manufacturing. We as leaders in manufacturing have to make sure that our small suppliers do well. We have to make sure that they are paid on time, and we make sure that they are taught how to develop their industries, build up their skills, and do it across the value chain.
Okay. Sanjay?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, India having probably missed the opportunity of creating a very robust physical infrastructure. I think developing a very robust digital infrastructure is probably what is going to make a difference, and that is going to be good for financial inclusion, for broadening the tax base and revenues for the country. It's going to empower people of the country and also lend us an opportunity to be globally competitive, because through the internet and through the digital framework, small businesses, medium businesses, large businesses could extend their tentacles, their products, services to anywhere in the world and be competitive.
Right. Avinash, we've spoken about a relook at the entire public-private partnership model. How do you see it evolving in the next phase if all members of the so-called Team India to participate?
You're absolutely right. I think the opportunity that is there ahead of us as a nation is tremendous, and we have to be able to collaborate, and the PPP is going to be extremely critical. So one of the things I think which is very, very key out here is the ability to improve the financial closure on these projects. And in the funding of these projects is important. If you have to deliver at a reasonable cost, I think we need to enable some of this stuff. Also, if you look at the dispute resolution that currently is an issue, we need to be able to enable some bit of that stuff as well. Also, the PPP requires that the different stakeholders collaborate. And Sanjay was talking about the digital infrastructure. I think that's extremely key in terms of what that can enable. And lastly, again, skilling of people is going to be extremely important for the efficiency and the timely completion of some of these projects. I think, so again, Make in India, Digital India, Skilling India, and essentially, all of this thing riding on top of a digital infrastructure is going to be key to achieving our growth plans.
Mr. Sriram, what is the big idea that you are betting on?
Two big ideas, not one. One is, of course, I agree with Sanjay about the digitalization of especially in the banking sector. If I can, and all second is, of course, the rise of the woman power. If I go back to the Jan Dhan Yojana, of the accounts that we opened, 51% of those accounts are of those of women, and 80% of the accounts that we opened had mobile numbers. Over 3 decades ago, when I joined the bank, the things were completely different. And I'm sure to another 10 years or 15 years, you will find, as someone talked about SMAC, I think JAM and SMAC are the two big things that I am sure we'll see the future of India in the coming years.
I'll let Amitabh have the last word in this discussion, but let me quickly bring in Mr. Bhargava here. Mr. Bhargava, we've got a great vision ahead, but let's look at the slightly shorter term. If we are in a sweet spot, and that's where we started the discussion from, what needs to be done to ensure that growth is sustainable? What are the 2-3 things that you would be looking at?
I think we have to ensure that business can carry on and grow unhindered by various obstacles. Because as long as there is a good environment for people to invest and do business, the growth of the economy will continue and you don't have to do very much more. Now, what hinders the growth of the economy and the environment are things which are well known today, including all the delays in decision making, the suspicion and the distrust which exists between various wings of government as well as between government wings and the private sector. I think the private sector itself has to take very concrete and urgent steps to try and create a much greater feeling of trust and confidence in their actions, that they're not in business only to increase their personal wealth, but they are in business to look after the interests of all stakeholders who are concerned with the businesses. So I think all these things will need to be done. It's not a one-sided business where only government has to act.
Right. Amitabh, some bit of introspection also coming in from industry, and God knows we need that as well. But on the whole, I know you've set very, very ambitious targets when it comes to ease of doing business in India and where we are going to be in that, metrics in the near future. But if there was one message for all those people who are getting a little impatient, wanting to run on the tarmac, so to say, what would your message be?
I think we are right on track. We must understand that, and I'm saying this as an analyst, that in the last 9 months, as far as the economy is concerned, this government has not taken any wrong decision. It's also taken bold decisions in terms of adopting the ordinance route for insurance, for coal. It has opened up the economy to FDI in a very, very big way. It's focused on something which had never been done before, and ease of doing business in a very, very vigorous manner. And I have a lot of optimism. I have a lot of optimism simply because India has great entrepreneurship. It has a great private sector. It has, we have the strength of having a manufacturing base. We have ports. We've demonstrated that India can be a global player. It's a center for compact car manufacturing across the world. Our pharma sector has gone and penetrated global markets all over the world. And we've demonstrated our ability to do frugal engineering, innovation and entrepreneurship in a manner in which the rest of the world must emulate India in many ways. And therefore, you asked about one sector, and I think defense and aero engineering sector is one sector where India can be an early winner. It can penetrate global markets. So I'm a huge, huge optimist on India, and I personally feel that it's time for the private sector also to act and not merely talk. Lots have been done, and I think it's time they also delivered and started investing in India now.
Absolutely. We'll end it on that note. Invest in India, bet on India, and of course, India is on the path to a great future. Thanks so much, Kiran and gentlemen, for joining me on this panel today. Thank you.